Welcome on in, everyone, to the LCS Challengers League. I am Mazel. I'm joined by Gabby and Joshi as we're going to be covering some banger games for NACL today, and it should be an absolute fun one. Gabby, checking in with you. I know we were having some issues earlier. You feeling good? You ready to go? You hype?
Oh, yeah. I just needed to build up that adrenaline,
Yes.
working into the
Get the
top
blood
of show.
pumping.
Like, am I connecting? But we're in it. We're here, and I am ready for another week of NACL.
All
I can't believe you
right.
just do her like that. Like, everybody thought everything was fine.
Yeah,
until
I
you
was
brought
so
it up.
ready to be like, yeah, I was here the whole time,
come
like
on.
20 minutes before, like everything
We're real.
was full.
We're real here. We're not fake. We're showing, we have some fun now. It is going to be a very fun day because especially to be able to kick off our week number 6 and getting so close to the end, it's intense, right? Even though we do make 8 teams to playoffs, it does get down to the wire as well. But we've also had some incredible plays to show off a lot of the growth in our developmental league. And speaking of, we have our plays of the week ready to go yet again. So let's go ahead and see what we're voting for this time around. Return though is Get Back killing out Kim down. Arrow's trying to be the saving grace. Scary Jerry goes in with that killer instinct, but Arrow with the moonlight visual dash, and that's huge. That's 2 kills go over to Arrow, and following it up is APA on a killing spree.
Now, Lennon, how many Twitter accounts did you make to vote for that one?
A lot. A lot. No, I mean, come on. The Space Glide speaks for itself. I don't feel like you don't need to. You don't need to. Arrow really popping off there. Really excited to see that he's still able to function in that way, right? Like mechanically outplaying Maryville there. It was intense, and it was an Aphelios play I don't feel like I've seen a lot of the time, Gabby.
Yeah, though I do feel like you have an eye that's a bit more partial towards recognizing when this player pops off, but I can respect it, and I think it was very deserved in the showing in this play. I know that we've seen a lot of Aphelios, but it still takes that skill as a bot laner to make sure that you're actually capitalizing upon the kit that he brings.
It does indeed. And speaking of capitalizing on bot lane, though, Tomio had our second candidate for play of the week, as he was a little bit of a sneaky snake.
Bold of Rose Thorn. I get he wants to play around Onap, but now look at Tomio. The flash with the ult there, the double knock-a-pop Blossom. There's no way to out-heal that one, NXI, as you flash away and watch Spawn die.
Maybe sneaky mustache? Maybe not a snake. That point, it was. I broke Joshi just now. It's great. I love to see Tomio getting himself in there. I know Joshi had some strong words for some of the other votes that were going on for play of the week.
Shochi got robbed, man. Like, that was one of the better pentas we've seen in quite a while. And now, it is still worth noting that these are voted on by all of you guys. We already got the first ones. You do those ones on Twitter at the LCS.
Yeah, I didn't make enough accounts like Mazel did for that, so I'll keep that in mind.
It's a
next
skill
time
diff.
Shochi's
I mean,
on
come on. I just gotta get enough emails. Let's get it right. Make sure you're going to Path to LCS, though, on Twitter. Join that conversation. Make sure you're also using hashtag NACL in any of your tweets. Maybe you'll get to see them on stream later on. But something I'm very excited to see on stream, and not that much later on, is a video that we had some of our colleagues put together, and specifically a very fun one. We had a bit of a race towards playoffs going on here, right? We have 2 weeks left. We're getting very, very close. Well, we had 2 guys, Grapes and Desrex, come up with a little bit of a rap. I know Magic was included. We had Kangas on the edits. Can we go ahead and check out exactly what they have? Oh, no, we don't have it. Never mind. Okay, we don't have it.
That's...
But speaking of, though, I know it was posted on Twitter, so you can go check it out. But they actually are hilarious in the way they do it. And I know they've done a lot of raps in the past there, Joshi.
What I do know what happened is that Eric messaged me late a couple nights ago and said, it is crazy how much more flow than Magical that Grapes has. Right, he just comes in, and he's been there for all the Donkey Kong raps over the past couple of years.
And we do have it. We have it ready to go. So get your ears ready for the NACL kart race.
Welcome to the NACL Grand Prix. The race to playoffs is about to begin. Teams, on your mark. Get set, go!
the race to the playoffs this time of the year, and our champion is gonna take us to a new gear. Gotta rev up your engine, take your foot off the brake. We got any talent coming, this should be a piece of cake.
You better watch out, something wicked this one comes. Shoji just caught you, fiddling with your thumbs. When the Weepers walk the road, you better stay clear. The streets belong to Cincinnati, I fear.
Robbie Bobbitt's here to take you back to school. While music sequence will make you look like a fool. You'll tremble in your feathers before the attack, cause the last thing that you want to hear before the grades crack.
They're new to the league, but they got a lot to boast. 3 returning champions to make this guy toast. Meech and Young not looking so reckless, all part of a full and balanced breakfast.
Down the tracks they go. It's anyone's race at this point. That's right, but oh no. AoE's got a Tristana Ziggs combo. Take cover.
Late game run, it's time to get wrecked. Feeling all this damage is area of effect. Will on the hunt like he holds a grudge. Knock you out of the park like he's Aaron Judge.
The Titans of Collegiate got school in the name. Oh, don't worry, on a beeline right to the top lane. If you're down, but got fright on the mind, as the race to playoffs heads to the finish line.
The race is on and the clock is ticking. EG in the lab to get things clicking. Found the roll, Chet Shaden here to carry. Smoothie and King stacking bodies to bury.
Everyone rise to the pledge of own nation. Top just got a solo kill donation. You think that it's easy? I don't really doubt it. Oh, another upset? You want to talk about it?
Here comes the white flag. Just one more lap for our teams around the track. And my goodness, pulling away from the pack, your top 3 teams.
In the sky high, they fly high right before your eye, and before you die, you'll be asking why can't a rookie be on Wi-Fi? Oh yeah, it's Masu. Say bye-bye.
We got Kills and Mudo, those guys from 100 Thieves. If you face them in draft, there's tricks up the sleeves. When the chips are down, it's time to show the ace. Got the pedal on the clutch, drifting into second place.
It's liquid, they told them not to keep on the fire, but the way that they're playing, you can't get any higher. From 2 Chainz, Bradley, MVP, and Mir, they're leading the pack, and the end ain't near.
And off they are going to the finish line. Better step on the gas, cause we're running out of time. If winning's the goal and you really want to brag, then you gotta be first to pass the checkered flag.
The race to playoff begins, and that was our NACL kart race. Shout outs to all the guys for putting in a lot of effort at that, but also the raps just always turn out so good. Especially Gabby, I know you're coming in to join us. So what do you think about our rap skills here for Deserex and Grapes?
I feel so well informed, and there's nothing like putting it to some rhythm to be able to impress into my brain all the facts I need to know about where we're at in this league. So I personally I was commenting on the bounciness of the cars, and that
and also the fact that they're in the wrong order.
Yeah.
Hey, I said that in our chat, like, we don't worry about it. All right? They had a direction. They had a story they wanted to tell, and the story got told. But, don't worry about the positionings. TL are still in first, and they should be in front. Anyways, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about where we're at. I know we got just the breakdown there, but specifically, we're going to plays of the week now. Tobio is going to be the one that wins it. So it is the Braum, what was it? The sneaky mustache?
Yeah, the
that
Nico.
doesn't work really well together.
Sneaky mustache.
Sneaky snake mustache. There you go. We'll take a look at that in just a little bit, but I do want to go ahead and bring up our standings because we were talking a little bit about where we're at in the state of things. And I know that Wildcard are looking ahead at Team Liquid Challengers, 2 games above them. They just can't reach them. But it's everyone else who's still fighting in the pack. I love that DSG and FlyQuest Joshi have found a decent amount of strength in a late game push.
Yeah, we're starting to get a little bit of separation between the top half and the bottom half of the standings. And it's also worth noting that while there is a very clear top half and the bottom half, what we're actually mostly looking is that 8th place line, right? Evil Geniuses currently has the head-to-head over Supernova, but with 2 weeks left, whoever is below that line is not going to make it to playoffs.
And I think that's the most difficult part, right? When you're sitting there with, especially Evil Geniuses Challengers right there in the neck of things with Supernova. It is a bit terrifying. But speaking of Supernova and speaking of what we have going on today, we got our match schedule. So let's go ahead and bring it up because we're kicking it off with Wildcard versus Team Fish Taco. And then we're rounding things out with our second series, Evil Geniuses Challengers versus Supernova. Anything you're looking forward to here, Gabby?
Personally, I'm looking more towards that second match between Evil Geniuses Challengers and Supernova because when you are at the borderline in the standings to make it into playoffs, they split evenly in the head-to-head. I believe last time they drew the draw. So that really comes into play when you're trying to secure your spot in the bracket to come.
It's going to be a very fun matchup, especially because I didn't have to talk to Joshi and see what he wants to look out for. Because we want to ask you to spam in chat who you think is going to be winning. Is it going to be Wildcard? Is it going to be Team Fish Taco for our first series at least? Make sure you type it in WC or Taco. Again, Team Fish Taco. I would love if you could have a different tri-code. But I love it
Quad
so much.
code.
And, yeah, something. But I do want to go ahead and bring up a little bit of a highlight on one side of this matchup, and it is Wildcard, because I do feel like we've had so much talk about this roster, so much talk about kind of the underdog status, the untalked about status of Keel. As he is one of our best junglers, he is consistently performing, and the strength that you see from this roster, Joshi, is point and simple, and they are one of our top teams.
It is honestly really impressive how these guys have been performing so far, right? And I think Keel, again, said it best. I love going back to his interview where he said, yeah, this was the AoE Ginger Turmeric core that did super well in Proving Grounds 2 splits ago. They did well as Wildcard in spring. They're continuing to do well as Wildcard now in summer. And with a couple of new players coming in Zamuda and Dombre, it only feels like they've gotten stronger.
Yeah, it truly does. I think the addition of confidence is my biggest thing for Wildcard, because you see a lot of confidence in their plays, right? They're still playing with a lot of these crazy meta picks that we see them grabbing, right? They are the ones that are running Saligo Sejuani mid, and I appreciate that. But on the other side, Team Fish Taco is a team that, yes, they're still trying to get it together. Yes, they're trying to figure out the exact pieces that work, but we have seen singular pop-off moments from the likes of Onad, from the likes of Spawn, but as well as Rosethorn here, Gabby.
Yes, I think Spawn, one of the narrative points has been the aggression with which he is willing to approach games nowadays and really be that difference maker in the clutch moments. I think NXI, I'm sure that we'll be speaking plenty on him, because when looking at the wins from Team Fish Taco, it feels like his engages are really at the forefront and allowing newer players to the scene like Lunacia to shine in a way that you want to when they're trying to solidify their identity in the NACL. So still a lot to be very excited about when it comes to this squad.
I also want to give a personal message from Lunacia as well. Unfortunately, when I recorded, the audio didn't record properly, but he does want to say that he's really actually super thankful for everybody who watches. He was saying that the only reason why he's been as hard on himself as he has been so far this split was entirely because of the number of people he wants to make sure he's not letting down. It feels as though he still has a lot of room to grow. But again, big thank you to everybody who's watching and supporting TFT.
And I love it also because I know we'll talk about it a little bit later, but this top lane matchup, they are great friends. Zamuda was even in an interview saying, you know, the only person I want to face from here on out is Lunacia. I just want to take Lunacia down. That's all I want. But I do want to go ahead and focus on another piece of Taco, and specifically the fact that we have to look at NXI. Yeah, you know, one of the above. At this point, I feel like he's the shell. He's the stability, the engage. I don't know if that fits the shell. But you do have NXI, who has been a crucial part, even with the change in his position from jungle to support, Joshi, as we want to see that kind of adaptation and growth from him in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, the thing that we always look at with role swaps and rookies is whether or not they will be able to team fight well. And I feel as though NXI, especially on a lot of these engaged champions, has been already doing that. We knew he was an aggressive player before, and seeing his willingness to try and get all these fights started and be a carry force for the team has really actually allowed Team Fish Taco to have opportunities to play when they normally would not have. And I think it's really worth saying that as somebody who has role swapped, this is already performing above our expectation.
Yeah, I think that's the important factor is his mind is still there, right? I still think the decision-making power that NXI had as a jungler was one of his strongest strengths. He used that in an aggressive manner. I think it comes out really well in support, depending on what matchups he has. But speaking of supports, though, got to talk about the other side. When we were coming into this, we were saying, you know, both these supports, they haven't necessarily been highlighted, not been talked about as much as maybe they should have. I think Dombre deserves it here, Gabby.
Yeah, one of the newer faces to come into this roster. So I think everyone was kind of biding the time, seeing how is Dombre going to be able to fit in. But when you look at what he's offered in the team fights and being in the same way that we were just discussing with NXI, the playmaker that can set up the carries of your squad, Rel is just a pick you have to be comfortable on nowadays, I feel like. And both of these supports are showing that in full effect.
And also, Lennon, gotta do it to you. We got to see what happens out here in the bottom lane.
You really didn't have to.
This was one of the more impressive things that we actually have seen coming out from Dombre, right? As he has been really good at getting a lot of these fights started. And again, as a player who has not had a lot of time to play, in the Tier 2 ecosystem, seeing some of the things that he goes for with actually pre-planning behind a lot of the plays that he goes for really helps make Dombre set himself apart from a lot of the other people in the league.
And that plays into not the bot lane meta, but the rest of the draft for Wildcard. I feel like when we talk to Wildcard, they're always kind of proud of the fact that they are fighting you from minute one of loading into draft, right? You have to figure out how you're going to approach it because they will always have some spice ready to go. And this team, while I know we talked like last split about the combo of, Insanity and Diamond cooking up some tech, I feel like this is literally the cooks of NACL, Joshi.
The cooks? I mean, I could see that, right? They have had a lot of really interesting drafts, so Ligo definitely been experimenting with some tanks like the Sejuani in the mid lane.
Yeah, and speaking of Wildcard, I mentioned earlier, they're just out of reach. They're just right there. They're right there. They get a stool, they get a little stuff, they could reach it, but they can't because Team Liquid Challengers have been consistently 2 games ahead of them. And while Wildcard can look back and be happy that they 2-0'd Team Liquid Challengers, doesn't matter because first place is right out of their reach. You see, if they just had a little bit of something to stand on, they could touch Team Liquid there, Gabby, right? Like it would be right there.
So close to getting to ride the roller coaster, but no cigar for Wildcard here. I think, though, that it's still a big win for them to take away the recent match against Team Liquid Challengers, because sometimes you'll run into a situation where there is such a dominant team that the second place kind of loses a bit of their luster. They get deflated when they're not able to hold their own and create that contention. But some unique drafts came through, and I like the style that they brought to make us forget that they're a little out of reach.
just a little out of reach.
Just a little
I like
bit.
that our producer Jay suggested using the predictions as a stool, right? Just like step onto
perfect,
that. The extra bit of the graphic. Think outside the box a little bit.
Hey, I mean, as somebody who
There it is.
in most
There you go.
cases, I have to stand on a box when casting, I very much relate
Oh, no.
to this image.
I see.
You'll know my height changes sometimes on
Yeah,
the
people
LCS
don't
launches.
realize how tall a lot of the
Dude, why are all, like,
people?
so many color casters are so tall, and then I feel so short, even though I am average in height. Yet
They're just-
I
It's
always
okay.
feel.
They're
When you
just
cast with
giants.
me, I am like slightly below average for American men, so you'll at least
This
feel
is
the
why
proper
it
height.
works. We
There
need
you
to
go.
get
Yeah.
into the booth, but right here we're all the same height when it comes to the NACL.
That's
so,
the beauty
you know.
about the remote casting. Is
Yeah.
that you just have to move the camera a little bit. It's great. Anyways, we got our draft ready to go for game number 1. So Gabby, Joshi, take it away.
You're right. We do just have to move a little bit. So I'm going to be a little taller for a bit while we go into this. I want to feel like I'm over 6 feet. I want to feel how tall Wildcard feels compared to Taco currly, I would
Yeah.
say.
It is definitely a series right here.
Why
I feel
are you
that makes
doing
you
this to me,
shorter.
production?
This is definitely
Fine.
one of the series where we have to look at it and remember that Wildcard Gaming just came off a week where they were able to take down Team Liquid Challengers 2-0, the only team to have done so far this split. And now, after having gone with 1-1 with AoE and Supernova, this is actually a really interesting matchup because Team Fish Taco, while they are still sitting towards the bottom of the standings, they can also look at some of these other teams that were able to reach up and pull Wildcard down a little bit further.
Yes, exactly. There's a lot of kind of those middle chunks that are somewhat close to one another. So these singular matches, even down to the single game, really do matter a lot. But I think Wildcard coming in off of a high because of that victory that you mentioned against Team Liquid. It was something they previewed and saying they were coming with a spicy draft, but I think in execution they were just able to dominate in the way that they wanted to in moments and show their strength as individuals and a team, that scrappiness that has been talked about so much with this squad. And we'll see how they fare against Team Fish Taco, who, I mean, according to the recent interviews we have seen on the side of Taco, they still seem like they have a confidence of, yeah, we're going to make it into playoffs. We're not worried about it. So you do have to make a strong showing, though, in these final opportunities of the last remaining weeks of the regular season.
I also think it's worth noting that Team Fish Taco has outpaced our expectations, right? We had a presentation last week about whether or not Supernova's current placing in the standings was them not living up to their expectations. But I think both Team Fish Taco and Supernova have been teams that have gotten more wins off the rest of the field than we were expecting. And this is an opportunity for Team Fish Taco to pick up another win going up against Wildcard, and giving Spawn some of these tools to be really aggressive, and also NXI on one of these classic engage champs is the kind of start they need to have going up against this one. There's going to be a Nautilus coming out for Dombury, another counter to the Rel. Both these players already have champions that will allow them to be aggressive.
Yeah, aggression is the name of the game in this one. And we just came off of the match with 2 games of Rumble versus Mudo. So I'm expecting to see some confidence coming in that regard. But I do agree with you, Joshi, in saying that Taco have a really solid bot lane brought through. When you increase the number of engaged champions that come, Xayah tends to rise in priority, and Spawn will be piloting her, as many bot laners have chosen to do with the evolving meta. And then Rel being such a strong pick for NXI. Lunacia choosing to bring the Renekton into the top lane. We're talking about how Rumble ended up working for Zamudo. I think we can say a lot of the same when it comes to Renekton for Lunacia.
Yeah, it is definitely something where you are better for Lunacia, but this lane matchup is really tough. It is one of the better matchups into Rumble, right? There aren't a lot of champions that are good into Rumble early on, but what this does necessitate is whatever Rosethorn decides to play is now going to need to be fairly aggressive. They are going to need to try and help out this top side of the map, because Renekton when behind sucks. When Rumble's behind also sucks. And so this is definitely one where you need to kind of flip the scales a little bit in order to help out Team Fish Taco's top side. We know that Lunacia was a player that was consistently beating up on some of the best top laners in lane last split. Has been quite as dominant this time. He really needs the help from the rest of the roster.
Yeah, and a lot of that is going to come from whatever that pick is, like you're saying, from the jungle position. I'm also curious to see what direction Wildcard go in that regard. You see the Kindred banned away from Keel, for instance. We know that Keel is pretty strong on those carry junglers. The Viego, for instance, working in recent memory. But then you also have an additional value in the bans of the Sejuani, because that could go for Keel or Soligo as of late. But rounding it out with the taking away of the Quinn for the last ban for Taco, and getting back into the picks. Some focusing on mid lane, some from otherwise for Wildcard, because Rel can technically flex. That is one thing we talked about, or haven't talked about. But I think because NXI specifically has been playing very well on the pick, that's where we can expect it to go.
Yeah. I also find this Quinn ban really interesting, right? Because Wildcard is so known for having these early flex picks early in the draft, right? You touched on the Rel, but I have to imagine that both Keel and Soligo have put games on the Rumble in the jungle and in the mid lane as well. So protecting Lunacia's top lane a little bit, making sure that the Rumble actually goes where they are expecting it to go, is something that Team Fish Taco has to be particularly aware of going up into Wildcard. And look at this, we are seeing a couple opportunities for flexes as well, but instead it's Soligo going on to his best champion.
Classic Soligo pick with Lissandra coming through. And yeah, I personally queue a lot with the Rumble jungle, so I always hope to see it come through, but I never hold my breath, because it always tends to float towards one of the solo lanes. But Wildcard, I think, using that flexibility of these picks to kind of conceal some of their draft for the time being until they lock that Lissandra for mid position. And then Wukong coming through for Keel. And Wukong is one of the picks that had gotten touched on in 13-13, just a little bit of a light touch though. And we've seen that even though we've went on to the new patch, a lot of pro players are still electing to go on the picks that were somewhat targeted, as they still fit in the meta.
And as the Braum comes through, I do think it very funny that we see Wildcard. They hover over the Iron, they hover over a couple of supports. They're just like, well, are any of these good? Fine, we'll play the good champion. We'll play Wukong again. They're so wanting to play other things on the map, but you really need some physical damage to come through. And as NXI does go over towards the Braum, it does help out their bottom side of the map a lot. The problem that we have here is that so much of Wildcard's damage is going to be ignoring the shield, the unbreakable that he's going to be trying to put up. So much of what they try to do just goes right on through, and it doesn't matter if NXI is trying to mark Dombre the entire time, if Saligo is going to be coming over a wall and locking down multiple members. But as we look at the rest of this draft, Gabby, the big thing that I'm going to be looking at in particular is how do Wildcard solo lanes do? Zamudo is favored up on the top side just based on the champions, and Saligo, he loves playing this matchup. It's the matchup where he has had the most success so far throughout his probably entire career because he's consistently putting Aries in the dust.
Yeah, I think that the solo lanes are going to be big indicators of how this matchup is going to go. So we will for sure keep our eyes there. I also, when it comes to wildcard, just want to look at Lens when you're on a pick like Kaisa and the team fights come later. Somebody who has been positioning very well and having great target selection. So seeing if he can make hella use of that killer instinct. I don't know why I threw in a hella right there. I guess I'm just in that chill of a mode right now going into this. Very intrigued. But I'm also curious as to how this Rel is going to perform for Rosethorn because, you know, we talked about it for NXI, his most played pick within the split, 6 on her in fact, but this will be the first for Rosethorn. And we have seen somewhat of a resistance of bringing her into the jungle in terms of professional play until recently. So she's starting to make her come back in that role.
There's a big question, right? Rosethorn has been a big damage carrier for Team Fish Taco in a lot of the games that they have actually won. And now, you know, Rel does a lot of things, but damage is not one of them. And so he's setting up for the rest of his squad in this position, and he has the tools to try and go towards the top side, be really aggressive there. But Rel's like jungle clear is surprisingly fast. But even saying that, it's not super fast. They should be expecting to be behind Keel in terms of tempo on the map. And so I'm wondering if we're going to get something similar, right, from the games that we were having last week, where we saw a lot of effective tri-lanes when you effectively have this support coming into the jungle.
Yeah, I mean, that does just kind of increase those tools that you're able to throw across the map if you do want to go for that aggression in a different way, right? Trying to kind of suppress what Wildcard might be bringing in these solo lanes. But do you have faith in one draft over the other? Of course, you have to consider the team cohesion and kind of the players and how they've been performing as well.
I think if nameplates were off, I would actually feel pretty good about Team Fish Taco's draft coming in, right? They have a very straightforward composition. They have some engaged tools. They have pick tools, and they have ways to get out a lot of the aggression that Wildcard is going to be throwing out. But as soon as you turn nameplates back on, you start going, ew. Like, Zamudo is super, super aggressive up here in the top side of the map, which does leave him vulnerable, but also can build him a lot of leads. Saligo, again, this is one of the champions that he is most aggressive on in the game, and this is an opportunity to showcase why he has been one of our best performing mid laners so far against his rookie Onet.
Yep. Eyes on Saligo to see how he holds his own against Onat here in the mid lane. And speaking of that aggression that Zamudo brings when he's on the Rumble, I mean, even just looking at the previous match was 9-6-4 in game number 1 against Team Liquid Challengers with 3-1-12 in the next. So clearly able to be effective for the team and oppressive in a lot of ways. But I know that Taco don't want to stand down. They'll be trying their darndest, Joshi, in this matchup.
I also want to highlight something for you, Gabby. Zamudo has been criticized by his teammates and his opponents for not buying wards, not using his trinkets.
Yeah.
This is going to be something that we will look quite a bit at, because I remember in their series against Team Liquid, I think he bought his first control ward of the entire split. And
I was wondering if y'all were still tracking that, if there was an updated number.
I don't know what the total number is, but it might just be 1, right? Because that was the last series that they played, and now Wildcard are looking for their opportunity to create pressure up on the top side. But at the same time, Team Fish Taco are going to be invading their opponent's red buff. And this is an interesting read. If Wildcard don't know about this, then Keel, I mean, the most common path for junglers right now is you'll do Raptors and you'll go to your own blue buff immediately. And if they come back and they're like, oh, my buffs are gone, that's a big problem.
Well, stepping up to it now, though, Rosethorn gets one stun onto Keel, but the bottom lane for Wildcard is rotating. So Rosethorn can use the Ferromancy to get out.
Yeah, and they do find their way out of that, and that pushes Keel towards the top side. Maybe going for a more standard route, but I also expect that he's got the tools necessary, and he's already pinging towards the opposing red buff. Rosethorn does not clear the jungle particularly fast, and he's going to be doing the wolves on his way over to meet Keel at the top side of the map.
Yeah, a lot of time spent on that bot side, and got the ward down, but in the end, you kind of know the direction that Keel is going. Now Keel focused up on red, and as you're saying, they should be running into one another. The ping's already coming through.
Yeah. Keel has no red buff, but he does have the support of people moving first. So Ligo has priority in the mid lane, and Zamudo is already on his way. Rosethorn has to concede the buff, and so ends up being a little bit of a neutral trade. And this is one of the funny things. If you've been listening to the interviews with Wildcard, they talk a lot about how important it is for Keel that Zamudo has priority in the top lane. I actually believe that's part of why this team has been one of the few squads that have been aggressively trying to pick Rumble, so that Zamudo kind of forces priority just on account of the champion he's playing.
Yeah, historically, Keel has leaned towards this top side, and when you have a solo laner that is willing to play the aggressive picks that can benefit from getting those leads, then that is one way to do so for sure. And I think Keel has definitely been a very big focal point in this team's success over the last kind of weeks and the split thus far, not just because of facilitating the lanes, but really locking down on the objective control. So we'll see how he manages that in the early game. Right now, Rosethorn venturing back towards the Scuttle Crab, though, to secure the vision here in the topside river, and already seeing the supports kind of roam and try and find a pick somewhere. NXI hovering around mid, as Soligo has been pushing up on that lane.
Keel, as they start going for this, Rosethorn coming back on in to try and contest this. Keel does secure his own blue buff off of that one, and does waste a little bit of Rosethorn's time, but at the end of it, it doesn't feel as though Rosethorn is losing all that much. Because of the early paths that they went for, he wasted a lot less time getting to these positions in the first place. And now Wildcard, you know, they are finding a spot where the mid lane maybe not going quite as well as they were hoping for, but at the same time, this top lane, this Rumble, has been having a lot of pressure up there.
Right now, Spawn and NXI trying to get a little cheeky positioning as Lens and Dombre have been reunited on the bot side. Keel hovering around the river. About 15 seconds until we really start to get some of the wards kind of put up around the Dragon Pit and try and catch out if Rosethorn's going to make any plays towards bots.
Now, we are seeing that Rosethorn looking to make a bit of a first move down towards the bottom half of the map. I actually wonder what his plans are, as he does end up pulling the dragon out of the pit. He does this very slowly on his own, and while his bottom lane does have priority, they have not started moving just quite yet. I have to imagine that Rosethorn must have been spotted at some point, and as Spawn and NXI are moving over towards that, Wildcard can potentially look to contest if Soligo teleports back.
Making the rotation over, teleports being used by both mid laners to get directly back towards lane. And then Keel hovering over by Try. Getting a little bit of a face-off here. Soligo gets charmed when he tries to get towards the rest of his squad, and Rosethorn gets hooked in by Dombre. Too much damage taken, flashes over the wall. Exhaust used on Keel, but with no jungler for Taco. They're having a difficulty with the stand. Onat has fallen, and Wildcard. They do lose their jungler in return, but they're collapsing upon the remainder of the play. Draw another summoner from Spawn, and that was a lot of scrap around a dragon that will still keep up as both junglers went down in that fight, but the kills in the favor of Wildcard.
And so many of them going on to Lens as well, having completed the recurve bow before the fight ends up coming up huge. Wildcard blow up this game out of nowhere, and it was a place that I don't think any of us were expecting. Seeing this entire draft, we were looking towards the solo lanes, but one of the big things I've been asking for from Lens' entire split was seeing a little bit more aggression and watching him flash over this wall in order to get the kill onto Rosethorn before rejoining the fight, and then not looking to go for NXI, but instead immediately turning his way onto all of the important members, hitting the carries throughout all of these fights has been a big upgrade for Lens, making sure that there's no opportunity for Kingfish Taco to fight back.
Yeah, and a triple kill for your bot laner coming out of that. A solo over on the top side. Zamudo picking up a kill, use the ignite to secure it onto Lunacia.
And Lunacia ends up blowing the flash, and Zamudo does not. I mean, it looked close until it wasn't, right? The fact that Zamudo just stood there and delivered, ends up finding the solo kill onto Lunacia, and also is able to crash the wave. It ends up being a lot more than just the death. and the gold going over to Zamudo, because that's going to accelerate this rumble a lot. And now that your top side is winning and your bottom side of the map is winning, it's super tough for Team Fish Taco to try and come back. We'll take another look at this one as Lunacia jumps in, has to struggle, and flashes right on into the equalizer, stays in there, unfortunately, not doing as much damage as I think he expected to.
Yeah, it seemed like he was trying to get over it, but instead, right there in the middle of the burn, too much to be taken, so Lunacia did end up going down. And also, no flashes except for NXI's on the side of Taco. Lots of resources used. Both summoners were used by Spawn in that last fight. Of course, some expelled on the opposite side as well.
Nice.
Looking to punish here on mid. Onat had to dash away from that one. Lots of pressure with a presence of 3 from Wildcard here on mid.
And patience coming through from Soligo as well, choosing not to throw out the ultimate, try and lock down Onat. Having already seen the cleanse, a little bit surprised to me that Soligo doesn't go for that, but it is going to be a trade of objectives here on the map, as Wildcard saying, we don't need any dragons, we're not going to get that late into the game. Instead, we're going to be picking up this Rift Herald, make sure we can accelerate our team in gold. So Wildcard, I mean, trading a lot of position here on the map, but now we're going back to classic Zamudo things up in the top side, right? One of the things that his team has been frustrated about in the past is how aggressively he will go for a lot of these freezes. And yes, you build up these massive individual leads, but you're not able to help your team. Right now, his team doesn't need any help. All the plays are happening on the other side of the map.
Yeah, it's one thing to, as the solo laner, getting this lead, also need to focus on how you convert that lead towards elsewhere. But when everyone's putting in that work and managing to win out in the fights without you, then that's great because you're a top laner that doesn't have teleport. You're not here to be able to go and assist them in that way. But gold lead is spread across the board here for Wildcard. It's 2.3k overall, but, you know, the farm advantage and kill advantage for Zamudo, the assist advantage for Keel, pretty much good farm across the way, and of course that early triple that we saw from Lens, really putting in that work on who is going to be a big carry for this team. Already built the Kraken Slayer. Zamudo, though, might get a bit punished here on the top side, throws down the equalizer, starts to venture forward, gets exhausted, flashes towards the tower. Rosethorn gets the stun up, but Zamudo trying to see if he can bring one down with them. He does. Can it be 2? It's the 2 for 1 and the flash out from NXI. Oh my, that was a play that went a little bit awry there on the top side.
It's a disaster coming through, and look what's happening on the far side of the map. Now Spawn's not allowed to farm either. Keel has the Rift Herald. This is so much money going right back on over to Wildcard after Team Fish Taco try and go for a play. I like the idea, but Zamudo throwing out the ultimate preemptively in order to clear out the wave, making that dive even more difficult, made the play functionally impossible. Now Wildcard, not only do they get the 2 for 1 on the top side, they're also going to be rewarded with an entire turret down here on the bottom side.
Yeah, Rift Herald dropped down, and as we are not towards 14 minutes yet, that's still a lot of plates, but still standing for the time being. That gold lead, though, is just going to get a little bit bigger. And again, on both sides of the map, sometimes when you get a big lead like this, you're thinking, okay, there's one player that's holding it all, which isn't always a bad thing, right? As long as it's on the right player. And I think you can be happy with Lens getting a lot of that early advantage. But Zamudo also is going to be able to accelerate so much and continue winning out on that top side matchup and be able to clear out the farm and secure some vision in the river.
We're taking a look at this, right? It doesn't look to me as though Zamudo knows anyone is here. He seems very surprised. He sees the garden, he sees the exhaust come out. But as the play ends up moving, these characters just don't do hardly any damage. And Rosethorn, I think that his crash down was still on cooldown, right? He had to use it to get over the wall in the first place. Ended up not having that little bit of extra crowd control. It holds Zamudo in a place where Lunacia could actually retreat from.
Yeah, I was worried for a moment that Zamudo was going to go a bit too forward and then set it up where Taco could collapse upon him without having to take too much tower aggro, but because he retreated towards that tower quick enough, was able to get a significant trade back and a lot of value just for a single death on him and maintain that lead. Meanwhile, on Wildcard side, they weren't able to knock the tower previously, but look, Lens is just going to keep farming up here, try and even up the CS a bit and take this turret down. Obviously has gold filled into his pockets in other ways, just besides farming. So a very good position for the carry of the wildcard side, as Heel also clears out the enemy jungle, both of camps and wards.
This is potentially one of the biggest gaps as we start looking towards the second dragon of the game that teams have had just in terms of itemization, right? This is the strongest point of the game for Wukong. You finish the Divine Sunderer, you basically never die. And at the same time, with the Kraken Slayer already completed, Lens is now back. He's going to have most of whatever it is he's going to be going next, potentially a PD, maybe like a Gale Force. And it's going to be so hard to actually take this guy down in these upcoming fights. You see that he's actually waiting to figure out exactly what he wants. It ends up just being a BF sword, but compare that to what is in Spawn's inventory. It's nowhere close.
Well, Zamudo has to be a little careful of Rosethorn rotating on up, but you can tell that he's working with the intel of a lack of intel on the enemy jungler, basically. So not pushing too much onto Lunacia, but doing enough damage to put some fear into his eyes. And yeah, big leads in itemization for Wildcard. And on that point, if you're looking at Taco, yes, when you're working with a supportive build in some of these junglers, you're going to hit your Mythic Faster, Locket of the Iron Solari, which is great for team fighting and great for that protection. But we saw when attempting to go for that dive on the top side, how that lack of damage worked out for Team Fish Taco. So they need to find a way to be able to catch up with what they can put behind some of the protective capability of this comp. But right now, focusing down on the bot side, Wildcard are able to answer that early dragon that was taken by Taco. Of course, the first one they were willing to give up and grab the Rift Herald in response, but this time they don't even have to worry about stacking. They're already breaking into it and extending this gold lead to 4,500.
I have to expect that Wildcard are also going to be playing for this upcoming Rift Herald as well. Spawning in less than a minute, they have a very powerful Rumble. They have a lot of strength kind of across the board, and that's part of why we see the members of Wildcard now pushing up towards the top side, making sure that they do not give any objectives back at all. And Lunacia just like walks up a little bit, takes so much of the Flame Spitter, and he's already down to 60% of his HP. There's not a whole lot that Team Fish Taco can do in order to recover their position here unless it's off the back of Onet. He's been quiet so far this game. He's only really had an opportunity to fight with Saligo when they were going down to the Dragon in the first place, but he's the one who has this easy-to-use pick tool. He's the one who can try and find their way onto players like Saligo and Lens in order to get these fights started and pick off one of the Fed members before the fight even begins.
And that's why when you are looking at Onet and all the while getting that farm up, making sure to keep working in that build, has a stopwatch. So when these stopwatches start coming into play, you have to consider that on the side of Wildcard for the next time you get into some fights. But look at the way that Zamudo can just keep being pressed up on that top side. When the Dragon is down and the Rift Herald is up, then you know if you're Lunacia that there's a high likelihood that Wildcard are leaning towards top, and you want to be wary of that and just try and keep this turret standing as long as you possibly can.
I also want to point out where Lunacia did choose to put his ward down. Or not Lunacia, Zamudo. Like, he put it halfway up the lane, so, you know, he's much less susceptible to lane ganks, but he doesn't actually have a whole lot of support in terms of vision. You were calling out before how he was playing a little bit further back based on not knowing where Rosethorn was. This is almost an overcorrection, I suspect, coming out from Zamudo, right? He doesn't know where Rosethorn is, and so he's always assuming that he's actually in the lane because he just does not know better. Now, Wildcard, the rest of them, it is kind of on the rest of the team to use the pressure that his topside has actually built to enable them to actually go for some of these fights, or go to him to take down this topside turret.
And a potential start right now. Dombre gets the hook, and the Rift Herald getting dropped in the meantime. Teleport from Taco. Spawn using the Feather Storm. Another teleport in response by Wildcard, but Rosethorn locked up in it and has fallen. Another to follow as Lunacia is taken by Keel. Wildcard, effective use of having the Rift Herald in their pocket and getting into the midst of this fight with a single hook from Dombre. And it's a play that's working in their advantage as they take the first turret across mid and then get another slam to take the second. Still even following up in the fight slightly more.
Oh, man.
Oh, that was a lot gained by Wildcard.
A third crash coming through as well. I mean, that'll take it below the last threshold. They're going to get 2 turrets and the top one out to bat. after that one. I mean, they're just getting everything I could possibly ask for. And so much of it feels as though it is coming off of the back of Zamudo and Lens once again. We got to see a massive equalizer in that fight. And Lens, again, stepping up really aggressively now that he knows he is able to. This is a game, Gabby, at this point where we're mostly just waiting for the Baron to spawn so that Wildcard have one of the game-ending objectives to force their way into the base of Team Fishtaco.
Yeah, we're only at 17 and a half minutes, Joshi, and we're just hovering right under that 8,000 gold lead for Wildcard, and again, across the entirety of the map. Side lanes cracked open, mid lane cracked way open with the 2 turrets and that 3rd crash onto the inhibitor turret, so it's definitely their game right now that they have complete control over. So if you're looking over at Taco, I mean, a lot of it's just to, stall out until you can try and offset some of that damage, but Wildcard are not leaving a very big window for them to do so.
I do kind of want to go back a little bit to the draft, right? Because I feel as though, well, yes, this is a tough game. I feel as though there are champions that we know that Lunacia can play up in the top side of the map that would have made this laning phase much more palatable. And I think one of the big ones, the most obvious one, is actually his Olaf. He has had a lot of success on this champion in the past, and it is one of the few champions that can actually beat the Rumble in lane because you are able to counter shove, and yes, you are a mana champion, so you will eventually go but you can sustain a lot of the damage that Zamudo is going to be doing, and you have opportunities to all in because Zamudo's only crowd control are slows. I feel as though Team Fishtaco, by opting into this Renekton matchup, kind of sacrificed just one lane almost in its entirety, and unfortunately, it's one of the players who has most consistently been getting leads for them the first part of the game. Now they just don't have that.
And considering the close friendship between Lunacia and Zamudo, I think they know where each of those players stands in the context of their teams, being somebody that can really be a difference maker in terms of Lunacia when on picks like that Olaf, or on Wildcard side, Zamudo, on this Rumble, that he's going to be working hard to dominate that lane and take the most advantage of that matchup, and did so really effectively. And Wildcard, making plays on both sides of the map, and now because of that, Taco doesn't have any chance to step up to the 3rd dragon of the game, so this is the 2nd one stacked up for Wildcard, and they'll be able to just keep matching any of the potential rotations from Taco, right? It's Wildcard that have just an inkling of where Taco could potentially be, because they know they can't go over towards that bot side, so they have to be here on top.
And we do see Sligo going towards the bottom half of the map, right, in order to create pressure there, try and potentially draw some members of Team Fishtaco away, but Team Fishtaco, I love thinking about games in terms of how many fights ahead or behind they are. This is definitely a game where they are at least 3 fights behind, and those have to be absolute blowout fights. So the way that this does need to happen is we need to see either Rosethorn or Onet, maybe even Lunacia, try and find an opportunity to go for one of these deep flanks, but it's becoming more and more difficult to even hold vision on their side of the jungle, let alone try and clear out vision to find a flank.
Zamudo is the first to venture forward. Unbreakable thrown up, so NXI is trying his best to take the majority of this burn. But Wildcard are just creating the space. We're in Baron territory, right? 20-40 into the game, and the warding that was previously drawn by Taco now cleared out. You can see the sweepers in full effect from Wildcard and able to get control of this top side.
Yeah, and Wildcard, I'm actually surprised that they're not trying to pull the trigger around the Baron. They're so much stronger than their opponents, but there's no need for them to take risks. And we see Dombre once again resetting, bringing some more control wards out for his team. And it looks as though, my guess is they were saying, hey, we're really close to a bunch of breakpoints in terms of our itemization. Let's just wait 30 seconds, a couple of minutes, in order to make sure that we can actually hit all of these item spikes. And now Wildcard, as they come back out onto the map, taking no risk, and giving the red buff over to Keel and Lens. And surely at that point, we'll go for a fight around the Baron.
And 2 full items for Zamudo, same for Keel, and it's been a bit since Lens was able to finish this off as well, though you are looking towards someone like Spawn, who is trying his best to keep pace and did bring a lot of farm and has 2 items to his name, but Wildcard taking their time to be as strong as they can possibly be before drawing out a potential fight here. All ultimates available, flashes too for the side of Wildcard, and Taco finally have all of theirs at the ready, but Dombre is going to continue doing that forward positioning that you expect with the Nautilus, always threatening with the Q and seeing if they can draw something in. All the while, Onat does have teleport pushing on that bot side so they can get some kind of turret pressure. 2 roots ushered by Soligo. The Baron is already burned down. Great zoning from Wildcard. And the fight to follow. Glacial Fissure tried to use defensively, but Wildcard are still in pursuit. Rosethorn slowed on down as can be, mounts up just to be able to create more space, and the Turo Baron buff is for Wildcard to swing around this map for the next few minutes.
Great googly moogly. What are you supposed to do when you're sitting in both fire and ice at this point? They're just all dead. They try and come
energy.
True. Not a whole lot that Team Fish Taco can do about that one. You chill the fish and then you grill it, and now it's just the Baron has allowed Wildcard to already open it up. The Turo Baron buff showcasing what it can do across this map. And now Wildcard, I mean, they have the opportunity to kind of fight wherever they want, whenever they want. They're already 11,000 gold ahead, 23 minutes into the game. The next fight, Gabby, should really be the last one, because Wildcard just kind of doing everything. Once they are given this lead, they're not making any real mistakes. They're not giving any actual opportunities for Team Fish Taco to try and come back. That's one of the things that has allowed Wildcard to become one of the best teams in the league.
Yeah, and there's only a minute to go on this next dragon, so that might be the fight that ends up really breaking things open with still over a minute and a half left on the Turo Baron buff. So, yeah, Taco got their first turret during that. You know, that was kind of just Onat breaking down the last little hits on something that was already weakened, but other than that, they've had a difficult time finding an opening for themselves, and with the supers going down mid, that means that you do have to worry about how Wildcard can usher that heavy wave forward with the Baron buff in tow.
Yeah. I do want to give a brief shout out to Onat this game, because he's playing the Ahri into Lissandra, and not just any Lissandra, into Soligo's Lissandra. And Onat was actually winning lane, which is a huge achievement for a rookie player going into one of the most tenured players in the entire league. That said, I gotta get this.
Soligo's stunning up with a Ring of Frost, uses the Glacial Path to create more distance. Lunacia stunned up by the Frozen Tomb, so lots used by Soligo to just draw the attention of multiple players of Taco, because the rest of Wildcard are still pushing through with this wave. Teleport coming in from Soligo to try to be able to finish this off. They take one of the turrets. Soligo gets stunned up, goes into stasis. As a result, Glacier Fissure already drawn down, but Lens picking up his first kill, looking for more. Spawn answering with a Feather Storm, but it's already a double for the opposition. Wildcard pushes the rest of Taco away, focusing on the turret so they can get their eyes on the Nexus. One of your top teams of the league, showing it in full force in Game 1.
Yeah, I mean, that game was fast. That game was really dominant coming up from Wildcard. There was really only 2 places in the entire game where I felt as though Team Fish Taco had an opportunity to play. The Dragon fight and the dive up from the top side. And both of those were massive wins coming out from Wildcard. As we take a look at the gold graph and the damage charts, I mean, yeah, we even got to see it in that final fight when they're fighting under 2 Nexus turrets. Doesn't matter, right? There's just not enough damage coming out from Team Fish Taco in this game for them to do much of anything, and congratulations to Wildcard on a very dominant performance.
I respect seeing the Rel come through in the jungle, but doesn't seem like Taco were able to stand up to the early advantages that Wildcard created both on the bot side and the top side. I am curious to see if there are any adaptations made in game number 2, or if Wildcard ends up keeping a strong hold on this matchup. We'll find out on the other side of this break.
So fly like a hula hoop. Girls out of sight, never felt so good, now we getting